Please remember to like, comment, subscribe, and share. In the description of this video, you can find my compiled link. Through there, you can find ways to support the channel, my other social media, and more. I hope you enjoyed this video, and thank you for watching. How's it going? How's it going, everybody? CJ here, back another video. We're doing a first thoughts today. This first thoughts is on Commander Liara Portyr. This commander's got a ability similar to melee. Well, it triggers similar to melee. It makes the spells you cast from exile this turn X less to cast, where X is the number of opponents attacked this turn. So if you got a normal pot of 4 people, you can attack 3 opponents and make all the spells you cast from exile cost 3 less to cast. And Commander Liara Portyr will exile the top 3 cards of your library and you may cast them this turn. Really cool. This is a very powerful commander, especially at uncommon. This thing's going to be fun. The categories I'm going to be talking about today are ways to attack safely, because you're going to want to be able to attack each of your opponents every combat, so that way you can increase the reduction on your spells. That's key, very key. Then we have creatures with damage triggers or attack triggers. That way you can utilize those creatures when attacking in order to just get extra triggers, because you're gonna have to attack anyways, so you might as well attack with creatures that can benefit off attacking. And then we have additional ways to cast cards out of exile, so that way you can have more card selection when you're casting spells, and some one-off cards. We're just gonna hop right into this. Safe ways to attack. Reconnaissance seems perfect in this deck. If all 3 of your opponents have good blockers and you're not going to be able to get in, you can attack with a creature at all 3 of your opponents and then take them out of combat after the trigger goes off, and you'll still get the trigger and all your creatures will be safe. Seems great. Dolmen Gate, Iroas, Loyal Unicorn, all fantastic. They prevent combat damage being dealt to your creatures. Goblin War Drums creates evasion by giving your creatures menace, so they're a little harder to block, which is pretty good. Chroma's Memorial, great card in this deck. Great card in most decks. Archangel of Tithes makes it harder for your opponents to block. Eldrazi Monument, indestructible, good. And Frontline Medic. Frontline Medic is pretty good in this deck because you're going to be attacking each opponent, so that means 3 creatures are attacking, so you can get the indestructible trigger. And then just some keyword abilities that you should look for creatures for this deck, just because they're going to be better for attacking. Indestructible, obviously. Very good. You have flying, and there's a lot of hate bears that have flying. Those would work really well in this deck because they've got good evasion, and they give you a secondary game plan that slows your opponents down. Unblockable is always great, and menace is just more evasion. You could also go a different route. Instead of trying to get a few creatures in, you can just go wide and just throw garbage creatures at your opponent, so you don't care if they die. You're going to have so many creatures, so it doesn't really matter. So like a big token strategy could work really well with this deck. If you do go with a go wide token strategy, then cards like Goblin Rabble Master, Assemble the Legion, and Rabble Rousing could be very good in this deck. Next, we're going to talk about creatures that have damage and or attack triggers. These are creatures that if you can get in with them, or if you can get the attack off with them, you're going to get an extra bonus, which is really good. Adeline seems pretty good. Brimaz makes some more tokens. Curse of Hospitality, really fun, gives you a card to cast from exile. Curse of Opulence is ramp. Atali, more cards to cast from exile, except these ones are free, so it doesn't really add to the strategy very much. Lelia does add to the strategy, gets very big. Mezio Mugger, pretty cool card here. Smuggler's Copter, Looter Scooter, love that. Chief Jim Hopper can get you a lot of clue tokens. You have Tectonic Giant, which has a couple of attack triggers, so you can either get cards to cast from exile or deal some damage. Adriana, Captain of the Guard, seems pretty sweet in this deck. Actually has melee, can buff your creatures, make it harder for your opponents to block. Grenzo seems very fun in this deck, especially if you go in the go wide strategy to ensure that you get some hits in, or the flying strategy, evasive strategy, just because if you get hits in, it's going to go off. It's just going to go nuts. And then you have Neheb. Neheb's got a very powerful damage trigger. Could be fun in this deck. Next, we're going to talk about additional ways you can cast spells from exile. You have cards like Burgi, the backside specifically. Seems pretty good. Breaches. Breaches is nice in this deck. It's also a damage trigger, which is pretty cool. Direfleet Daredevil can let you steal cards from your opponent's graveyards and cast them from exile. You have Jessica's Will, awesome card, just super powerful, also super powerful in this deck. March of Reckless Joy, kinda similar, works really well. Stolen Strategy, steal something off the top of your opponent's libraries every turn, seems fun. You find some prisoners, which has extra utility, which is really nice. Belborka works really well in this deck. Outpost Siege, Urabrask, the new Urabrask. That card seems fun, seems very powerful in this deck. And then Valakut Exploration, turn your lands into cards that you can cast from exile. Seems very on theme. And now we're off to the one-off cards. Pull from Eternity. What if you run out of mana and you exile something that you want to cast? Pull from Eternity, you can get it back. Neheb the Eternal. If you're going to be dealing a lot of damage to your opponents, you can net a lot of mana with him. Then you have a couple Chandras that work really well. Acolyte of Flame and Flame Color both let you cast spells from exile. Extra Combats work really well in this deck because you'll get more cards to cast from exile and get a bigger cost reduction. So cards like Aurelia, Seize the Day, Aggravated Assault, Waves of Aggression, and Port Raiser should all be heavily considered when building this deck. Ways to give haste also seem very powerful. If you can give your creatures that just entered the battlefield haste, then you can get extra attacks in and potentially get that cost reduction faster. So cards like Anger, Fervor, Hammer of Perforos, Tuk Tuk Rubble Fort, and Old Urabrask all seem like great includes. Wild Mage Sorcerer can cascade for you off the spells you cast from exile. And then you have Lithoform Engine and Stronic Resonator, so you can copy Commander Liara's trigger and get extra cards exiled and an extra big reduction. There's definitely a way you can build this deck to be kind of combo-y and almost like an eggs deck, but you don't even need eggs. You can do higher CMC artifacts because you can bring the cost reduction down. Like if one combat you bring the cost reduction down by 3, you can just cast 3 CMC artifacts or less for free and just kind of go nuts. That could be a really interesting way to build this deck. It's kind of like an eggs commander, but the eggs are big eggs. That's just a fun little side idea that I have for this commander. But that's everything I have for Commander Liara Portyr. Hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll see you next time. Peace out, everybody.